The last bullet in a stark, unforgiving wilderness, a man and his young son navigate hunger, danger, and mistrust. Pursued by an elusive mountain cat and shadowed by a mysterious stranger, they hunt for survival, their bond tested by the relentless hills. With only one bullet left, the man must protect the boy from threats both animal and human, each step a gamble against the silent menace of the wild. Written in Hemingway's spare taut style, this tale of endurance and instinct captures the raw struggle for life in a world stripped to its essentials. The sun burned low over the dry hills, and the man walked with his rifle slung across his back. Dust rose from his boots, settling on his cracked lips. He had not eaten since dawn, but hunger was an old friend, quiet and patient. The boy walked beside him, carrying a small sack of bullets and a canteen that sloshed half empty. They did not speak. The hills were silent but for the crunch of their steps and the faint cry of a hawk circling above. They came to a stream, thin and clear, cutting through the stones. The man knelt and drank, his hands cupping the cold water. The boy watched him, then did the same. They sat on the bank, the rifle across the man's knees. He looked at the boy's face, thin and brown from the sun, eyes like his mother's, sharp and questioning. "You see anything?" the man said. The boy shook his head. "Nothing." The man nodded. He took a bullet from the sack, rolled it between his fingers, then slipped it back. "We'll wait." They waited as the sun sank, painting the hills red, then purple. The air grew cool, and the boy pulled his jacket tight. The man did not move. His eyes stayed on the far ridge, where the deer might come. It had been 3 days since they'd seen one. 3 days of beans and hard bread. The boy's stomach growled, and the man pretended not to hear. When the light was nearly gone, a shape moved on the ridge. The man raised his hand and the boy froze. The deer stepped slow, head low, sniffing the wind. The man lifted the rifle smooth and sure, his breath steady. The boy's eyes were wide, fixed on the deer, but he made no sound. The shot cracked, sharp against the dusk. The deer stumbled, then fell, its legs kicking once before it was still. The man stood, slinging the rifle back over his shoulder. The boy ran ahead, his steps light now, the sack bouncing against his hip. They reached the deer, and the man knelt, drawing his knife. The boy watched as the blade worked, clean and fast, the blood dark on the ground. The man cut a strip of meat and handed it to the boy, who took it with both hands. "Eat," the man said. The boy chewed, the raw taste filling his mouth, his hunger easing. The man cut more, wrapping it in cloth from the sack. They worked together, silent, until the stars were out and the air was cold. The man stood, wiping his hands on his pants. "We'll come back for the rest," he said. The boy nodded, his face pale in the starlight. They walked back toward the camp, the weight of the meat heavy in the sack, the rifle steady on the man's back. The hills were dark now, and the hawk was gone. Chapter 2. The fire was low when the sun broke over the hills, casting long shadows through the camp. The man woke first, his hand on the rifle before his eyes were fully open. The boy slept on, curled under a thin blanket, his breath soft. The air was sharp, smelling of pine, and the deer meat hung in strips over the fire to dry. The man stood, joints stiff, and scanned the ridge. Nothing moved. He boiled water in a dented pot, dropping in a pinch of coffee grounds. The smell woke the boy, who sat up, rubbing his eyes. They ate cold meat and drank the bitter coffee in silence. The man's gaze stayed on the hills, the rifle across his lap. The boy followed his eyes but said nothing. A twig snapped, and the man's hand tightened on the rifle. A stranger stepped from the trees, hands raised, a worn pack slung over one shoulder. He was tall, bearded, his coat patched at the elbows. His eyes were steady, but his boots were caked with mud, like he'd walked far. "Morning," the stranger said, stopping at the edge of the camp. "Smelled your fire." The man stood, rifle low but ready. The boy edged closer to him, clutching the blanket. "What do you want?" the man said. "Water if you've got it. Food if you can spare." The stranger's voice was calm, but his hands stayed up, palms open. The man studied him, noting the frayed cuffs, the way his pack sagged heavy. "Sit," he said finally, nodding to a log by the fire. The stranger lowered his hands slow and sat, keeping his movements small. The boy filled a tin cup with water from the canteen and set it near the stranger, then stepped back quick. The stranger drank deep, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Oblige," he said. The man cut a strip of dried meat and tossed it to the log. The stranger caught it, nodded, and chewed slow, his eyes flicking between the man and the boy. "You hunting?" he asked. "Deer," the man said. He didn't ask what the stranger was doing. The hills were wide, but men didn't wander them without reason. The stranger finished the meat and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Saw tracks a mile back. Big cat. You seen it?" The man's face didn't change, but his grip on the rifle shifted. "No?" The boy's eyes widened, and he looked at the man, but the man kept his gaze on the stranger. "You staying long?" the man asked. The stranger shook his head. "Moving on, headed north." He stood, brushing his hands on his coat. "Thanks for the meal." The man nodded, saying nothing. The stranger adjusted his pack and walked back toward the trees, his steps steady. The man watched until he was gone, then turned to the boy. "Pack up. We're moving camp." The boy didn't ask why. He folded the blanket and gathered the meat while the man kicked dirt over the fire. The hills were quiet again, but the man's eyes stayed on the trees where the stranger had gone, and the rifle never left his hand. Chapter 3. The new camp was a mile west, tucked in a hollow where the wind didn't bite so hard. The man had chosen it for the overhang of rock that hid their fire's glow. The boy piled branches to mask the entrance, his hands quick despite the cold. They worked without speaking, the rifle propped against a boulder, always close. The sun climbed, thin and pale, barely warming the earth. The man skinned the rest of the deer, his knife moving sure through hide and sinew. The boy watched, handing him twine to tie the meat for drying. Blood stained the man's fingers, and he wiped them on a rag, his eyes flicking to the ridge above. The stranger's words about the cat hung heavy, though he hadn't spoken of it. The boy's glances to the trees said he felt it too. They ate at noon, sitting under the overhang. The meat was tough, the coffee gone. The boy chewed slow, his eyes on the ground. "Will he come back?" he asked, voice low. The man looked at him, then out at the hills. "Maybe, maybe not." He tore a piece of meat and handed it to the boy. "Eat." The boy took it, but didn't eat right away. "What if the cat's real?" "Then we kill it," the man said, his voice flat, like he was talking about firewood. He stood, brushing crumbs from his pants, and checked the rifle's chamber. The boy nodded, but his hands stayed tight around the meat. Afternoon brought clouds, heavy and gray, rolling over the hills. The air turned damp, promising rain. The man rigged a tarp from the overhang, his knots tight against the coming wind. The boy gathered stones to ring the fire, his steps careful, eyes darting to the shadows. The man saw but said nothing. Fear was a teacher, better than words. As dusk fell, the first drops hit the tarp, soft at first, then steady. The fire hissed, and the man fed it dry sticks to keep it alive. They sat close to it, the boy under the blanket, the man with the rifle across his knees. The hills were lost in the rain. The world shrunk to the circle of their firelight. A sound came then, not rain, not wind. A low cough, deep and guttural, from the dark beyond the hollow. The man's hand closed on the rifle, his body still. The boy froze, eyes wide, blanket slipping to the ground. The cough came again, closer, and the man stood, slow, his shadow long against the rock. "Stay here," he whispered, stepping past the fire. The boy grabbed his sleeve, but the man shook him off, gentle but firm. He moved to the edge of the hollow, rifle raised, rain soaking his hair. The dark was thick, the rain louder now, but he listened through it, waiting. Minutes passed, no cough, no movement. The rain eased, and the man's shoulders loosened, but he didn't lower the rifle. He turned back to the boy who hadn't moved, his face pale as bone. "Cat?" the boy whispered. "Maybe," the man said. He sat again, rifle still in hand, and pulled the boy close. The fire cracked, and the rain fell soft. The hills stayed silent, but the man's eyes never left the dark, and the night stretched long.